Good evening, everyone. In today's class, I will discuss a very important disease, Myasthenia gravis. It's a neuromuscular junction disorder, and the term myasthenia means weakness and gravis means severe. So, it refers to severe weakness of skeletal muscle because it's a skeletal muscle. In this disorder, impairments in skeletal muscle contraction occur because the body produces antibodies which can lead to the destruction of its own cells. So, it is also an autoimmune disorder. It is also an autoimmune disorder. As we can see in this picture, that it's a skeletal muscle and it's a neuron, and a neuron communicate with a muscle by a specialized junction, that is a neuromuscular junction. Okay, so we all know that performing any movements requires skeletal muscle contraction, and skeletal muscles are connected to motor neurons through a specialized structure called the neuromuscular junction. So we must understand the basic mechanism of the neuromuscular junction that leads to muscle contraction. But before discussing the neuromuscular junction, we need to understand how a motor neuron interact with the skeletal system through a reflex arc. So that's why I have already take a reference of this reflex arc. The reflex arc helps maintain balance, posture, and protect the body from harm. Okay, so a reflex arc begins with sensory receptors. So we can see that the receptors are present on the surface of the skin, and receptors are nothing but the specialized nerve endings. Okay, so for example, when the muscle is stretched, specialized sensory neurons detect the change. So it's the sensory neuron, it can sense the change of the environment and it can transmit the signal in the form of an electrical response or impulse to the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord. So, the information from the skin is carried by a sensory afferent neuron to the spinal cord, and then the spinal cord sends order to the effector organ via a motor neuron. Okay. So the skeletal muscles contract or relaxes in response to the motor neuron signal, and allowing the body to perform an involuntary movement such as pulling away from painful stimulus or maintaining posture and protect the body from harm. Okay. Here is the structure of a motor neuron. It consists of different parts, including cell body and axon. And axon terminals store neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers. This is a axon terminal, and axon terminal stores neurotransmitters. Basically, these neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that play a crucial role in transmitting signals between neurons or from neurons to other target cells such as muscle. And depending on the type of neurotransmitters and receptor, they can either excite or inhibit a response. Okay. So neurotransmitters are essential for regulating a wide range of bodily functions, and one of them is muscle contraction. There are two kind of neurotransmitter: excitatory neurotransmitter and inhibitory neurotransmitter. Excitatory neurotransmitters are glutamate. Excitatory neurotransmitters are glutamate and acetylcholine. Glutamate and acetylcholine. An inhibitory neurotransmitter is GABA. Okay. So here is the action terminal, and they houses the different kind of neurotransmitter. This is the action terminal, and they are housing the different kind of neurotransmitters. So here is the normal physiology of neuromuscular transmission. This is a neuromuscular junction, and neuromuscular junction is consist of a presynaptic terminal and a postsynaptic terminal. This is a end of a neuron action terminal, and this is also known as presynaptic membrane. Presynaptic membrane. And this is a membrane of a skeletal muscle which is known as postsynaptic membrane. Postsynaptic membrane. And the space between presynaptic membrane and postsynaptic membrane, the space between presynaptic membrane and postsynaptic membrane, this space is known as synaptic cleft. This space is known as synaptic cleft. So this is a action terminal. Action terminal, and within this action terminal there are some synaptic vesicles. There are some synaptic vesicle. Synaptic vesicle. This synaptic vesicle stores the neurotransmitters, and for muscle contraction the neurotransmitters are basically acetylcholine. The abbreviated form of acetylcholine is ACH. Okay. Now these acetylcholine molecules, for skeletal muscle contraction, they have to release in the synaptic cleft. For the release of acetylcholine, we need to perform vesicular transport. We need to release this vesicle to come over the presynaptic membrane, and here they release the presynaptic membrane. This vesicle comes and cross this presynaptic membrane, and then they release their as neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft. So now within the synaptic cleft there is acetylcholine molecule, and for this vesicular transport there occurs a chain of events, and we need action potential because they are the primary means of communication in the nervous system. Action potential enable the transmission of information over long distances within the body, and they carry signals from sensory receptors to brain and spinal cord and from brain and spinal cord to the target organ, that is muscle. What I am going to mean that when a motor neuron is stimulated, an action potential, when a motor neuron is stimulated, an action potential is generated. Okay. So here the action potential generated within the action, and then they travels down the nerve action to the neuromuscular junction. That this action potential that is originated within the action, then they transfer to the where they will transfer like down way, here, here and here, so on, to the action terminal here. Okay, so basically this action potential travels down the nerve, the neuron, the nerve action to the neuromuscular junction. Okay, here the action potential is traveling throughout the action terminal, and release of acetylcholine occurs. So action potential causes the release of acetylcholine from the vesicles in the presynaptic terminal into the synaptic cleft, and there also occurs chain of events like for this action potential there opens the voltage sensitive calcium channels. These are the voltage sensitive calcium channel. So these are voltage sensitive calcium channel opens, and there is lot of influx of calcium. Basically this calcium with some other proteins like synaptobravin, syntaxin, what they cause that they pulls these molecular proteins pulls the vesicles towards the presynaptic membrane, and then they helps to release the acetylcholine molecule into the synaptic cleft. Okay. So the skeletal muscle, the membrane of skeletal muscle, they are present on the surface of the skeletal muscle. There are some acetylcholine receptors. So here are some acetylcholine receptors. So many. Acetylcholine receptors are pentameric receptor. It has 5 subunits, 2 alpha, 1 beta, 1 gamma, 1 delta. Okay, and this so they are the acetylcholine receptor. This acetylcholine molecule binds with the acetylcholine receptors. The acetylcholine molecules bind with the acetylcholine receptors, and after binding with these receptors, whenever they bind with the receptors, what happens that these acetylcholine receptor gated channel opens up, and here occurs influx of sodium ion from the ECF to the influx of sodium ion. There is lots of sodium ion present in the ECF. This is a ECF, extracellular fluid, and this is a ICF. So from ECF to ICF there occurs a lot of sodium ions influx. Okay. This sodium ion influx generate EPP that is the end plate potential. But this end plate potential is not an action potential. Only action potential can produce response. So only action potential can cause skeletal muscle contraction. EPP is not sufficient to generate skeletal muscle contraction. So for skeletal muscle contraction, we need to generate action potential, and for action potential, generation of action potential, we need voltage gated sodium channels to be open, and voltage gated sodium channel open whenever this EPP potential reached by the sodium ions. Okay, and whenever this acetylcholine molecule get bind with acetylcholine receptor, there causes influx of sodium with little bit of calcium, but this calcium and sodium are not sufficient for generation of action potential. For generation of calcium, skeletal muscle contraction, we need a lot of calcium channels to be open and a huge amount of calcium. Okay, and for calcium channels to be open, we need to open voltage gated sodium channel. So this EPP is a voltage, and for EPP there opens a voltage sensitive sodium channels, and through this a huge amount of sodium comes within the skeletal muscle, and there causes depolarization of the skeletal muscle membrane and generation of action potential, so that the sarcoplasmic reticulum, the T tubules open up and the calcium released, and this calcium also causes skeletal muscle contraction by means of excitation contraction coupling. And till then, whatever I said, this is a normal physiology of neuromuscular junction and normal physiology of skeletal muscle contraction. But skeletal muscle contraction is the another process. There are so many chain of events for the skeletal muscle contraction. Here I establish the fact, the relation between a neuron and a skeletal muscle. So for a skeletal muscle contraction, we must have a motor neuron, and definitely we need to generate action potential which will propagate through the action terminal, through the action to the action terminal, and from the action terminal it will help to release the acetylcholine molecule from the synaptic vesicle in presence of or opening of voltage sensitive calcium channel, and the acetylcholine molecule released into the presynaptic membrane. They also get bind with the acetylcholine receptors that are present over the skeletal muscle membrane, and then there causes the influx of sodium ions that will generate the EPP, end plate potential, which is not an action potential. So for generation of action potential, we need EPP. For the EPP, our voltage sensitive sodium channel get open, and it causes a lot of sodium influx that causes the depolarization of the skeletal muscle membrane and generation of action potential, and that causes the opening of T tubules and release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. For muscle, the endoplasmic reticulum is known as the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and sarcoplasmic reticulum storehouse of calcium. So there is plenty of calcium in the skeletal muscle, and that causes the skeletal muscle contraction, which is another sequential events. Okay, so after contraction of a skeletal muscle, we must relax our muscle. So skeletal muscle contraction occurs because of these acetylcholine molecules that are present in the synaptic cleft. So after skeletal muscle contraction, definitely we have to remove these acetylcholine molecules from the synaptic cleft. So here is a presence of molecular seizure at the synaptic cleft. There is a molecular seizure. This molecular seizure cuts these this acetylcholine molecule, and it is known as, this molecular seizure is known as acetylcholine esterase. It's an enzyme. Acetylcholine esterase. So in this part, I have discussed that what is the normal physiology of a neuromuscular transmission. Another video I will explain that what happens for myasthenia gravis. Okay. So here is the sequential events. Please remember. So there is a nerve excitation. Okay, and for a nerve to be excited, we need to stimulate a motor neuron. There is initiation of action potential in motor neurons action. Okay, so within the action only the action potential is initiated. Okay, then this action potential has to be propagated to the action terminal, so it's nerve conduction, and then impulse reaching at nerve ending, that is the action terminal, and then they synapse with a muscle, so the neuromuscular transmission. Then the release of acetylcholine from microvesicles present at the nerve terminal. Then the diffusion of acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft and the binding of acetylcholine to the acetylcholine receptors. These are the acetylcholine receptors on the motor end plate. Motor end plate means the postsynaptic membrane of a muscle, and opening of acetylcholine gated channels in the motor end plate in the postsynaptic membrane. So whenever these acetylcholine gated channels open, entry of mainly sodium ions and a lesser extent calcium ions through these channels into the muscle fiber, and there is the development of EPP, that is the end plate potential, the potential that is not an action potential. It's only a local response that cannot generate response, that cannot that are not sufficient to generate a response. That local EPP, when reaches a threshold magnitude, then it will turn on the voltage gated sodium channels. They get open and the generation of action potential in the muscle fiber occurs. There is release of calcium ions from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is an endoplasmic reticulum for another cell, and for muscle cell it's sarcoplasmic reticulum, and there is the excitation contraction coupling. This is the chain of events after the calcium channels get open. This is the process of excitation contraction coupling, mainly caused by the contractile proteins are present within the muscle fiber. Basically they are actin myosin filament. Their cross bridges occurs and they may lead to the muscle contraction. Okay, in the next part of the video I will discuss the alteration of this normal physiology, and that can lead to a disease like myasthenia gravis that causes severe weakness in skeletal muscle. Okay, so if you are interested to know the details of this video, like what is EPP, what is action potential, how this vesicular transport actually occurs within the neuromuscular junction, you can write it in the comment section. Definitely I will make a separate video of these topics. Okay, so stay tuned with me, and don't forget to write your difficulties in the comment section and what you want to know from me in the next class. So stay tuned.